All right, hello everyone, it's Silver Kyle, and not too long ago, HappyConsoleGamer released a video called Too Many Games, and I thought that was an excellent video for a conversation piece. It's something that I've thought about before, and basically what he's saying is that nowadays there are so many freaking video games. There is more now than there ever has been. Obviously, as time goes on, each year, each week basically, there's more games than there've ever been because they keep adding to it. But I think what he was saying by that is that in this generation, each generation, there's more games for that specific generation. Like if you look back at the 80s when there was just like Nintendo and the Sega Master System, there was only a certain amount of games for those two consoles. Then in the 90s, we started getting a third console with Sony adding in theirs. Eventually, Sega left with the Dreamcast, and Microsoft came in. So we've always had three consoles. At the time, we did have two handhelds with Sega doing their own and Nintendo as well. But now it's Nintendo and Sony. And even though the Vita isn't doing that well, it's still out there, and there are still some games once in a while. This is a conversation for another video, but it's still out there. So there's two handhelds. There's three consoles. And there's also PC, and to an extent, there's even mobile gaming too, which I'm not really into, but some people are. So there's just so many games out there in terms of physical retail games, but also indie games where you digitally download them, and that just opens up even more doors because there's so many that are coming in. These smaller games that are getting a lot of recognition, and people are saying that these sometimes are Game of the Year games. Which I agree. Journey is one of my favorite games of all time. I love that game. Flower too. And so there's so many games. And then there's also Virtual Console, the Nintendo eShop, the Xbox Live Arcade, PlayStation Network. So there's all these formats that you can go back and play older games as well if you don't have them in a physical form. So for new gamers, not so much kids, because kids won't really pay attention to like older games while they're young, but if they get older and they really get into the hobby, they are going to have such a huge list, a library to go back to and try to play all these games. So on one hand, it's super intimidating, but on another hand, it's kind of a good feeling that either way, if you get into this hobby, you're always going to have a new game to you. Not necessarily new at the time, but even then, there are so many new games coming out constantly that you should be able to occupy yourself every month with a new game type of thing that comes out, and you should be all right. I mean, there's specific times where you want like a specific genre and that's all you play, but even then, most genres, unless it's something really obscure, you're gonna be able to find it, especially in the mainstream type of gamings. But then there's indie as well, so they kind of cover a lot of the niche stuff out there as well. So I just wanted to go over kind of like reasons why I sometimes think that there's too many games in terms of my own collection. For myself, this is a pretty big collection. There's tons of bigger ones. I'm getting close to 400 now, and I still have games in my collection that that are still sealed and I have not played yet. I'm trying to get to them, and eventually, I think that I will. And I buy games with intentions to eventually play them, either right away or down the road. My biggest culprit usually is I see a game for super cheap, brand new. So for example, I saw these games for like $10 each, so I picked them up. But the thing is that there's a Call of Duty every year. There's an Assassin's Creed every year. I'm not really in a big rush to play these games because I've played them tons of times before in their other previous sequels or their originals. And so I've had my fill. Eventually I'll probably want to play them at some point, but I'm not in a rush to play them. Same thing, another thing that I do is sequels where I think that it matters to play the originals first. Call of Duty, you don't really need to because it's a separate thing. Assassin's Creed kind of has a continuation as well. But anyway, for example, like Infamous Second Son, I've had this for over a year now. I got it at Christmas, and I haven't unsealed it yet because I haven't beaten the first two. I've played the first game on the PlayStation 3, but I haven't beaten it, and I want to beat that before I go on to the second one, and then eventually Infamous Second Son. Same thing with Pikmin. Pikmin is a kind of a double-edged sword because I know that it's gone up in price, but it is a sequel to the first two games. I played the first one when I was younger and I rented it, but I never beat it, and I never even played Pikmin 2, so I want to go back and play those. And this is another video that I'm going to do, is talking about sequels and my kind of like my OCD about wanting to play the originals first before I go on to like a third installation of a game, for example. But the other thing too here is that I knew that Pikmin was going to be going up in price because they had stopped making new ones. And also, it was on clearance for $20 when I picked it up, and it's still sealed. So that was an okay buy for me. And another one that I do a lot when I see that something is going to be valuable, or I think that it'll become valuable later on, or it's going to go up in price, so I get it while it's cheap. RPGs. RPGs are synonymous for this. They just generally go up in price for the most part. So I picked up Tales of Grace's F, and I still haven't unsealed it, but I got it for a good price. Once again at $20, and I assume that in a few years from now, even though I haven't played it, eventually when I get to the point where I want to play it, and if I hadn't picked it up, I might have had to pay more than $20 to pick it up. And last but not least is collector's editions, which I'm not super guilty of, but maybe half the times that I get collector's editions, I don't play them right away. Zelda Wind Waker HD, for example, I have still not played it. I have played Twilight Princess HD, but I still haven't, like, I've unsealed this and everything, but I wanted it, so I got it on day one, and at the time I was like, I'm not in a rush to play Wind Waker right now, I'm not in the mood to play it, so I'll just put it back in the collection, and I'll eventually play it. I know that I will. I'll play this before 2020, which is ridiculous to say, but at least it's in my collection, and I have the collector's edition for it, because I loved this collector's edition. It's just super nice. It comes with a figure. Comes with a bigger box, which is generally something that I generally enjoy a lot. But this is the perfect collector's edition that I like. It's not overly big. I do like the bigger ones. Sometimes it becomes like a really big statue or an art piece. Usually, if the bigger the box, it's usually because there's a statue or something in there that you can kind of show off. To an extent, that's why I have Tales of Xillia's, Skyrim, Halo 3 Legendary Edition. You can't see them probably because of the angle, but I have all those big pieces kind of showing in my collection as background pieces, which I enjoy getting. So that's kind of just an example of some of the games that I have in my collection as to why there's so many games and I pick them up and they don't get played right away. Anyway, I do think that it is quite intimidating to sometimes see how many games there are, more so for a new player that's really wanting to get into the hobby of maybe even collecting games. But on the other hand, I don't think you can ever be bored if you don't mind going back and playing older games, because there's so much out there. Even if you just look at, like, right now on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Wii U, if you have those consoles, all three of them, obviously, that's the other thing too that it comes into play with too many games, is sometimes some people only buy one console, and at the beginning of a life cycle, there's not a lot. But in time, by the end of the cycle, you should have a large amount of games in that system. Even the Wii U, where it's basically just exclusive Nintendo games, there's still a lot on the Wii U. I don't know if you can see it on the video right now, but there's a bunch of Wii U games there, and they're just all exclusive. So there's still a lot on that console, even though there's really no third-party support anymore. So anyway, thank you all for watching. You've been Bearded In. Beardage!